Hello, I'm Dylan.
And I'm Keon.
And this is Trust Your Doctor, that podcast where we accidentally cross the Berlin Wall because this week we listened to The Anachronauts.
Written by Simon Guerrier. I don't know how to say that name.
I think that's how they said it on the interviews, was like that. Director Ken Bentley.
And released in January 2012.
Yeah, so it's either Simon Guerrier or Simon Guerrier. Guerrier or Guerrier?
Guerrier.
Career.
I
don't know, nor do I really care that much.
But apparently it's not Peter Purves, and we've been saying it wrong for like 3 years.
Well... I
well.
mean, there's no going back. I could just go back and awkwardly edit in us correctly saying it every time if I really wanted to, but I don't.
Like Peter Purvis, I guess, said to the people who disliked the massacre rightly, oh well. Actually, he didn't say that. He said if you don't like the massacre, you're watching Doctor Who for the wrong reasons. Still never gonna forget that.
Still a really dumb quote, too. Because it's completely factually incorrect. Yeah, somehow this week while I was listening to this, not while I was listening to it, but like this week, someone on Facebook posted a whole bunch of First Doctor pictures, and I was looking at them, and then I recognized one directly from the massacre, and I was like, alright, I'm done here.
Guess I have to kill myself now.
Guess I have to shut down my computer and burn the hard drive.
Yeah, so we've been saying it wrong, which came as kind of a shock to me.
Not really a shock to me, because basically every other podcast said it correctly. I just never cared enough to say it correctly. Also, because I listened to all those podcasts after he had already left the show for us, so it didn't matter in the slightest.
Yeah, apparently, well, I read on the wiki at least that this is his first time returning with, what's-her-face who plays Sarah Kingdom.
Jean Marsh.
Yeah, Jean Marsh. And I don't know if this was just me. Well, Peter Purvis, I guess I'll start saying it right now, played the First Doctor in this, so he does like a decent job of it, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And they talk about it more in the interview at the end, but I didn't think Steven or Sarah really sounded like their TV counterparts, although maybe it's been too long to remember, so.
Steven felt more like Steven on the show than Sarah did. I mean, to be fair, Sarah was only there for 12 episodes, but like Sarah actually sounded 40 years older than she did on the show, whereas it sounded at least like Peter Purvis tried to make his voice sound younger.
Yeah, it didn't sound like Jean Marsh tried to change her voice at all based on those interviews at the end. Which, I mean, if she can't do it, that might be for the best, instead of like trying to fake it and completely sounding weird.
Yeah, and also there was absolutely zero framing narrative in this story, so what age they're supposed to be when they're telling the story is completely up in the air, too.
I guess, although Sarah dies, like, soon after this, so whatever.
Well, so there's an audio, I was reading on the wiki, there's an audio where the Doctor, Steven, and Sarah stop off at this house that grants wishes, and Sarah has a copy of her consciousness embedded in the house. So technically she lives for another 1,000 years.
Wow. Wow.
She's also had 3 audios before this, I think one of them being that one where a copy of her consciousness gets dropped off in that house for 1,000 years, so...
Is that the premise for the movie Monster House?
Yes. Yes, it is. Monster House is secretly part of the Doctor Who universe. So it begins with the Doctor, Steven, and it actually picks up right after Feast of Steven because they're still drinking champagne, and the Doctor's like, well, let's just keep running away from the Daleks for a while. We don't have to go face that yet.
Let's just keep running away from our problems for a while. Maybe they'll just go away.
I mean, to be fair, that's like what every Doctor does.
Could have just ran away forever and let history take its course. I'm sure the Daleks would have failed somehow.
Yeah, they would have. They didn't have the Terranium core, but they do have a time machine, so they're chasing the Doctor down.
Yeah, I
slowly.
don't remember what happened in Dalek's master plan, so...
Yeah, the Doctor steals that Terranium core that powers that device that kills everything. That's how it kills Sarah.
Oh yeah, they turn it on at the end and then it just kills all of them too. I remember that. So they get in the TARDIS and leave. and
Get into
some
a
weird
horrific
stuff
car
happen.
accident.
Yeah. They crash into another ship, and they wind up on a beach somewhere. And this beach/island that they're on, you don't know it's an island yet, but you find out sometime in the first half of the story. I really like the setting here for the first half. It was one of the few Doctor Who stories, I think, where it actually felt like they were in danger. Like, they don't know where they are. They're on a deserted island. They don't have the TARDIS.
Yeah, TARDIS is presumably destroyed.
Yeah. And they get into all these dangerous situations, like Sarah breaks her arm, and it describes it, like, graphically and stuff. And they don't have enough food for a while, but they need to make, like, this barricade to keep the wildlife out.
Yeah.
So it actually felt dangerous for once.
Yeah, it did. It was also really well set up because they crash and then they're on the beach. They're just on the beach.
Yeah.
And they don't really know what's happening. They're as much in the dark as the audience is, so they're figuring it out as they go.
Yeah, and I liked how they set up the mystery here. Didn't like how at the end of the first half, they just kind of solved the entire mystery right then and there in like 2 sentences.
But then they introduce a new mystery that they solve in exactly the same way.
Anyway, they're walking on the beach. Boop, boop, boop. Okay, no. That's you've seen that SpongeBob episode, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, no, they're walking on the beach and they see another ship, which is the ship they crashed into.
Yeah, and the crew comes out, and it's the crew of the... Hang on, wait, I wrote it down. Hank Morgan 4. It's the 4th Hank Morgan ship. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's the name of the ship.
Oh. All right. They're called the Time Pilots for the rest of the
story,
yeah.
Because they're the first human time travelers.
Yeah.
And the Doctor's like, oh, you guys finally did it. And Sarah Kingdom's like, wow, you must come from way in our future. And they're like, yeah, we're from the 40th century.
I think they say the 40th century is way in the past for them. So they're like way
something
beyond that. But basically their whole backstory is that they're well, they're not soldiers, but they're engineers, and they're part of an army. They're
testing the time machine because
they want to travel in time.
Yeah, the humans are fighting a war
against the wall of noise.
Sounds like us every time we record this podcast. Okay, so they're fighting this war, and they want the time machine because they want to make it a time war, I guess.
I think it'll just give them the upper hand in the war.
Yeah, they want to start fighting throughout history. The Doctor is rightly horrified at this because then all of history will become a fighting ground and the war will never end.
Like the War Games, kind of, except worse.
Or better, depending on how you do it. The 4th season of Star Trek Enterprise did something similar, where people came back from the future and this one guy's like, yeah, so these guys in the future are trying to change the timeline, so you're going to have to kill them with your 10 centuries out-of-date technology. Good luck!
Reminds me of that Family Guy episode where Brian and Stewie travel through time and they get visited by a future version of themselves telling them to do something, and like 5 seconds later, another future version comes like, no, don't do what those guys say. And then another version comes like, no, don't do what those guys say. That actually makes everything worse, and it just continues on
it's
like
one of
that.
the 3 episodes of Family Guy that I watched and actually thought was kind of funny.
Yeah, same, honestly.
So anyway, they're talking with the pilots, and the pilot's like, well, we don't fight, but we've got these guns. The Doc's like, well, we're unarmed, so we're not your enemies. Oh yeah, but you did crash into us, you maniacs.
Yeah, driving through time without a license.
Or any sort of safety precautions, because they didn't know if it was going to work. And I think Natalie Lang says this at some point, like, we didn't know.
Natalie Lang's the leader.
If when we started it up, we would just enter some sort of massive freeway of people traveling through time. So, we really didn't know what to expect when we fired this thing up.
They all have names. I don't really remember their names. Natalie Lang is the leader. And there's like 4 other people, I think.
I only remember Natalie, and I think Ben King was another one.
Yeah.
Ben King was married to one of the other people, not Natalie, but one of the other people. There's 4 of them.
None of them really have a personality, so I mean,
Natalie's the only one who really has a personality.
I mean, kind of. She's just sort of the leader.
Yeah, but she's like... They make this whole big deal about her being conflicted about helping Steve and the Doctor and Sarah versus protecting her ship because they need it to fight the war.
Yeah, I guess. Not too big of a deal, but yeah, I guess that was in there. Anyway, they, I think, go looking for the TARDIS, or they head into like the forest because they need to find some
Well, it starts
shelter.
raining.
Oh yeah, it starts raining, so they head into the forest. And the Doctor, Stephen, and Sarah are looking for the TARDIS, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the time pilots are just along for the ride because their ship is broken. I think the Doctor says they can use parts from the TARDIS if they are compatible to fix their ship, something like that.
Yeah, that was before we found out that they're fighting a war with the time machine. So they find the TARDIS food machine.
Yeah. And Stephen describes it. He says it'll give you a little bar of whatever, and it tastes like whatever you want.
It looks like cheese, but tastes like whatever you want.
Yeah, and I guess maybe I was just remembering this wrong, or they changed it, I'm not sure, but I remember this machine is just giving you whatever you want.
Yeah, so did I.
Huh.
From the few times we actually saw it, that one time Susan went and got milk or water from it or whatever.
Yeah. But, I don't know, maybe we're just remembering it wrong.
Yeah, it's true, the memory cheats. So they get to this cave, and they carry the TARDIS food machine to this cave.
Yeah, and from here on, it's like that. Did you read Hatchet in, like, 5th grade?
No, but I read the other survival story that we read in, like, 5th grade.
Oh.
There was, like, 2.
Yeah, there was the other side of the mountain. I'm not sure how I remembered that.
Yeah, I read that one.
Yeah, so Hatchet, if you don't know, is a book that you didn't know that I really liked it as a kid, but I did. Anyway, it's about this kid who gets stranded in the wilderness and he has to survive for like however many weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And right when because the plane he was on apparently had a food supply and it crashes into a huge lake. And right at the end of the book, he salvages the food supply because he gets really good at surviving in this wilderness, right? And he's like, well, I'm just going to make this dive for this food supply because I'm never going to get rescued, because he's basically resigned to like just living in the wilderness for the rest of his life. So he gets the food supply and he's like, wow, I have enough food here for like 10 years. And then like a few days later, he gets rescued. So this is kind of like that, except not nearly as bad. And they have a machine that just gives them whatever they want, whenever they want, which apparently works when it's not plugged into anything or hooked up to anything. So,
well, it makes sense when you find out later where they actually are.
Yeah, but
well, so okay, wait. Didn't Hatchet have a whole bunch of sequels, or was that the other book? One of them had a whole bunch of sequels.
Hatchet has a stupid sequel where some scientists or some group is like interested in how this 13-year-old kid survived in the wilderness. So they perform this experiment and they're like, do it again.
What? Most unethical scientists in history.
And then there's this what if, because the book takes place in the summer. So he gets rescued right at the end of summer and he doesn't have to survive in the Canadian winter. So there's this what if sequel, like what if he never got rescued and he had to survive through the winter. I read that one. It was kind of interesting, I guess.
Wow, this guy really milking that Hatchet money.
I know. Kid takes down a moose.
Whoa. Those things are strong.
Yeah.
Also, are you even allowed to kill moose in Canada?
I mean, he's a 13-year-old kid surviving a harsh winter on his own. I think you can forgive him.
I think the law will make allowances.
He just gets arrested as soon as he gets rescued.
So we found this moose carcass 5 miles down the road. Was that you? Anyway. So they're surviving in the cave. They sleep through the night. They wake up in the morning, and Steven's all like, oh yeah, we all keep seeing this thing just out of the corner of our eye, but we can't see it.
Yeah, there's something following them, so...
And they decide to split up.
Yeah. That always worked out for the first time.
Yeah. Works out great now.
The Doctor and Steven go to...
the ship.
Well, they say they're going to go look for the TARDIS, I think, but the Doctor actually wants to go check out the Time Pilot's ship, and Sarah and everyone else stays behind to form like a barricade to keep them safe or whatever.
To do hunting and stuff.
Yeah. Apparently they think they're going to be here for a really long time.
Yeah.
Before touchdown brings them back around. Okay, never mind.
So the Doctor and Steven make it to the ship, and somehow Natalie Lang got there.
She got there first.
Yeah. I'm not sure how that happened at all.
I guess she just realizes what they're up to and just
runs.
Sprints there.
Sprints through the forest. So she's like, oh yeah, I knew you were coming here. This is a pity. Looks like I'm going to have to take you in.
Yeah, because she's on to the fact that the doctor doesn't want to actually help them now that he knows they're fighting a war. And which
is understandable, kind of.
I mean, it's understandable. It's also understandable that it's also understandable what she does because, well, she's part of this war, so.
Yeah, and I think that's a good part of the story is that both sides aren't explicitly wrong.
Yeah. Kind of, not evil or anything, but at the end, when the doctor leaves them, is kind of like, wow. Well, when you hear their screams, but I mean,
but
I mean, I guess he did the right thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I thought it was worse than it was because when they're in the TARDIS, Doctor's like, oh, there's a city just down the way, and I thought he was just abandoning them on an abandoned planet. That. Yeah, no, he's like, there's a city just like a couple miles away. You can just go there.
Huh.
And I was like, oh, okay.
Wow.
Yeah, anyway, so So Steven and the Doctor get back, and the episode 1 cliffhanger is that not Steven getting shot yet. This monster shows up.
Yeah, this is the shadow that's been tailing them or whatever. And I guess it's the monster on the cover, this horrific ghost-like thing.
The time's bright.
Yeah.
And the Doctor just kind of goes, go away, and it goes away.
Yeah, the Doctor's, I think it's sort of left ambiguous at the end of part 1 and then at the beginning of because I didn't know what was going on. Or I think maybe I listened to the Doctor be like, hey, stop doing that. And I was like, wait, what? That can't just be how it disappeared. But then apparently that is.
It is.
As they reveal in part 2. I don't know. When I hear the word sprite, I don't really think of this horrific ghostly thing. I just think of like, I don't know, a little fairy or something.
It's kind of one of those things. It's like, do you think of the grim fairy tale version of the word?
Yeah, I guess.
Or the like dolled up Disney version. Like the original where Little Mermaid doesn't get the prince and just dies and washes away as sea foam. Show that one to your kids. Scar them for life.
That's honestly not the worst one.
No.
Yeah, I think
it's the only one I can remember off the top of my head.
I think in the Grimm's Snow White, they force the queen to like dance on hot coals or something like that.
Yeah, Sleeping Beauty, she gets raped while she's sleeping and gives birth while she's sleeping. Forgot about that one too. Anyway, the part 2 begins with Sarah's we see what Sarah did while the Doctor and Steven went off, and she climbed
a mountain.
Yeah.
Climb Everest.
With no ropes or safety of any kind. As indicated by the fact that she breaks her arm in a minute here.
Yeah. So they climb all the way to the top, and they find out they're on an island.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe this is just like hindsight, but I think I assumed they were on an island already.
So did I.
Just based on like the surroundings, like I don't know.
Yeah, the beach and then
tropical. So
it seemed like a cliche tropical desert island with the beach and the forest, and I was like, okay, island.
Yeah. But I guess it is pretty horrific to be like, all right, where are we? And then, oh shoot, we can't get off, and there's nothing here.
They could build a boat out of the time ship, I guess.
Eventually, but it's like, oh shoot, there's like not a city 2 miles away that we can walk to.
So, whoever Sarah's with, she had a name, but I don't remember it, sets up this transponder to contact the people to contact the humans of the future, though you kind of have to wonder that if they actually did travel into the past, how that would work, since they didn't know if it would work.
Yeah, I mean, meh.
But I didn't think about it too much, so whatever.
Well, they're not even in the past, as we learn in this part, so...
Yeah, so I think this actually summons the time sprite into existence. I mean, not intentionally, but that's what it seemed like based on my understanding of the events that happened.
Yeah, I mean, there was this like horrific scream, which the signal that this person sets up starts going off, and then there's this like horrific scream, and it gradually gets closer over the course of like 5 seconds. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Until it's like right in your ear, and it's like, all right, time to turn down the volume.
That happened a lot in parts 3 and 4 for me, actually, because every time they transitioned from places, they blared this really loud trumpet music, and I was like, oh god, my ears!
So anyway, the time sprite shows up and starts wreaking havoc What?
Oh, no, I thought you were trying to make a pun there. I don't know.
No, I don't. Why? What's the pun?
I don't know.
Oh, me neither.
Okay. Yeah, knocked Sarah off the mountain, and she's falling, and she stops her fall by grabbing a ledge and breaking her arm.
Yeah.
And it describes it to you in gory detail.
Yep.
You hear the snap, I think.
I don't remember the snap.
Potentially.
Yeah. You don't need to because of how much detail they describe it in. And this was a moment where I was like, wow, okay, they actually do seem to be in a lot of danger here.
Yeah. Especially since Steven also got shot at the end of part 1. I was like, there's no way they're just going to actually shoot Steven. And then they just shoot Steven, and he collapses, and they think he's almost dead. And I'm like, okay, wow, this just got serious.
Yeah, so I forget how the time sprite leaves, but the
doctor dispels it.
Well, they somehow make it down.
For Sarah, it goes down the mountain, and that's how it shows up where the doctor and Steven are. Yeah,
because the doctor and Steven and Natalie, I guess, show back up at the campsite.
Yeah.
And the time sprite's there, and they're like, whoa, it's a time sprite. And this is actually the end of part 1.
Well, part 1 ends right when Steven gets shot because they dispel the ghost, and Steven says that whole thing like they had no reason to trust that we were on their side.
Yeah.
That we had admitted we crashed into them, and the doctor just seemingly controls this monster that just attacked all of us.
Yeah, and the doctor also mentions this is when I first realized, okay, they're in the TARDIS because they don't do a good job of hiding it. The doctor mentions like, time sprite, that creature from Gallifreyan fairy tales that lives deep within TARDISes. You're like, oh.
And then he's like, it's not real, so I know where we are. And Steven's like, I don't get it.
You dense person.
I mean, to be fair, I didn't get it immediately either.
I did. I mean, I could have been completely wrong, but as soon as he said it, I was like, oh, so you're deep within the TARDIS.
Yeah, I guess I just didn't think of them being in the TARDIS, because I thought they were just actually somewhere.
But yeah, they are.
They got me on part 3 as well. Again, part 3 and 4. Anyway. So Sarah crawls over to Steven because the arm's broken.
Yeah, we didn't mention the love subplot in this, which is where Sarah thinks that she's maybe falling in love with Steven, and she's like, no, I'm not.
Well, Steven thinks it too, because it starts...
Yeah, Steven thinks
the very first line of the story is Steven talking about Sarah, and he's like, if she had stayed longer, maybe we could have been something more.
Yeah. So they're both thinking this. You find out kind of more about that at the end. But yeah, it seemed to me, maybe based on the ending, I can sort of change my opinion here. But as I was listening to this, especially parts 1 and 2, I was like, oh, so this is written by just a really intense shipper who doesn't really have anything to work with because obviously Sarah and Steven have to go back and Sarah dies and nothing ever comes of it. So, yeah. It's a really intense Sarah-Steven fan.
Pretty sure this is only Steven Sarah's story. I'm pretty sure he's not too enamored with the characters. But anyway, I find it kind of weird that the first and second Doctors seem to be, mostly the first Doctor actually seem to be these master matchmakers, since all their companions end up getting married. I mean, Ian and Barbara off-screen get married, Ben and Polly get married, and now Steven and Sarah. It's kind of weird.
And don't forget Susan and
David Campbell was his name. Oh, Susan. Yeah, Susan married David in Dalek Invasion of Earth, I think.
Yeah, and Vicky
marrying that Roman dude. Or was it
Greek.
That
or Greek Trojan? Dude? I don't remember.
Yeah, so...
doesn't she marry Paris or something, or some famous person from that story?
Something like that.
Whatever.
Or Dodo just leaving. I guess Dodo was the only first Doctor companion.
She didn't get married off.
And Steven, I guess, but Steven ended up becoming a king.
And getting married and having 3 daughters on that planet.
Yeah, that's true. And naming his youngest one Dodo. Anyway. Yeah, so that's kind of weird. The Doctor and Steven, well, the Doctor and Sarah are like, you've killed Steven, and then the Doctor's like, well, we could fix him if you have medical supplies in your ship, and they're like, okay, I guess. So Sarah goes with Natalie and Ben, I think.
Because
Ben,
go back to the
Ben
ship.
gets lulled to sleep by the time sprite in the ship. And they have to carry it, Natalie drags him back, and Sarah leaves her. And then they get there and they're like, what did you do with Natalie? And she's like, she has to explain that Ben got lulled to sleep and they can't wake him up, so Natalie's carrying Ben back.
Yeah, they encounter the time sprite while they're there, like we mentioned, and Sarah realizes that, hey, the doctor just sort of talked it down. I guess maybe I can do the same. And she just tells it, hey, stop bothering us, and
it works.
It works.
Yeah, and then so the doctor fixes up Stephen and then just imagines a door to the TARDIS, and it works.
Yeah, but I thought this was pretty creepy, though. They go to the beach, and there's this, like, mysterious door, and it's just a door, and it's nothing else, and they walk through it, and they're in the
TARDIS console room.
So yeah, that part wasn't that creepy, that he goes into the TARDIS. But yeah, the rest of it kind of is. And Stephen and Sarah are like, wait, what the heck?
The doctor's like, it was obvious for so long, and I was like, okay.
This is where the doctor just reveals the entire mystery, all in 2 sentences.
Yep.
So the TARDIS crashed into this ship, and it did that thing that they did multiple times in the show, where the TARDIS is inside another ship/TARDIS. They did it with the Master's TARDIS, I think, a couple times.
Yeah.
But then that ship is also within the TARDIS. So
time travel is weird.
So the island and its surroundings are just the TARDIS.
Projecting stuff because the TARDIS had to heal.
Yeah.
Also, Stephen getting shot wasn't real, apparently.
Yeah, none of this was real. Sarah's arm is better. And apparently the doctor knew this and was just stalling for time while the TARDIS healed itself.
Classic First Doctor, honestly. I might be misremembering, but when I heard this, I sort of started to remember that I thought that during the first or second Doctor, they established this fact that the TARDIS won't allow violence inside the TARDIS, which is why Stephen couldn't get shot. But then I was like, no, wait, that can't be right. I must be misremembering.
No, that is like a thing. They break that rule all the time.
Yeah, okay. Okay. I thought it was just something I'd made up. But...
No, because I think they actually mentioned it in what was the 6th Doctor Cyberman story?
I think it was Revenge.
Revenge, yeah, I think it was Revenge.
Or Attack.
I don't know. Anyway, in that story, I think they actually bring it up again, however many years later.
Yeah.
Where Lytton.
Yeah, because the Cyberman shoots someone in the TARDIS, and the Doctor's like, TARDIS isn't supposed to allow violence in here. Wow, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, it does a pretty poor job of it because, Natalie Lang tries to take over the consoles, and then the Time Pilots shoot everyone, and yeah, that's how part 2 ends.
The Doctor tries to, like, reason it out with... Well, he tries to reason it out with Natalie, like, you don't know how to use any of this equipment, and even if you did, you didn't know if it would be able to fix your ship. And Natalie's like, well, we can take the chance, so screw you, Doctor. So she starts messing with it. We didn't mention that, I think we already mentioned that Peter Purvis plays the Doctor, but I don't think we mentioned that Jean Marsh plays Natalie.
Yeah.
And those are the only voiced characters. All the other ones are just, they have, like, narration.
Peter Purvis plays the time sprite, apparently.
Huh. Wow.
Yeah. Well, there is also that Russian, possibly German guard in part 3 and 4 that Peter Purvis does an accent for, but he's the only other one who gets a specific voice.
Yeah, I don't remember specifically because, well, parts 3 and 4 were completely boring, so yeah. And we're about to get to that.
Right now, because part 3 actually started pretty good, because it starts with Stephen and Sarah running, and Stephen's like, I don't remember what happens, all I remember is running.
Yeah, it's he and Sarah sort of just wake up and they're running, and there's guns behind them and dogs behind them, and I knew where they were already because I read the description for this.
It's in the synopsis. The like little description they sell you to get interested in the story.
Yeah, and this was sort of what made me want to listen to this story, because it gives the synopsis or the first bit of the synopsis was like, they're stranded on this deserted island with these time travelers and they don't know what's going on. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, in Berlin, I was like, how are they going to tie this together? And yeah, the way they do it is kind of disappointing in a couple ways, but...
We'll get there in a second.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, actually only a few seconds, because parts 3 and 4 were... Well, I guess a lot happens, but none of it was much.
Happens in part 4. Part 3 does the classic Who thing, where they spend all of part 3 doing nothing of consequence. The Doctor doesn't even show up in part 3, by the way.
Yeah.
It's just Stephen and Sarah running through East Berlin.
Yeah, so what what they're running away from is the guards between the East and West Berlin Wall, also known as the Berlin Wall.
Just the Berlin Wall.
Also known as the Wall. So they wind up in East Berlin. They somehow make it across.
Yeah, they accidentally make it across, which is probably, I guess, the first indication that
something's wrong.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't really think too much of it. I was just like, all right, they made it across. And the doctors, according to one of them, I forget who says this, is on the west side, so...
With the TARDIS. Presumably. I think they're actually just making this assumption based on that's where they're running from.
Yeah, probably. Anyway, they hide out in like an abandoned warehouse or building or something. And
Steven's injured somehow. I don't remember how he gets injured, though.
Yeah, and they sort of have to deduce where they are because they're both from the future. And Steven's like, I think I remember something about this from the history books. Yeah, this is East Berlin.
Well, so they make this interesting thing, like Steven was talking about how in school they weren't allowed to talk about this one political event that was going on, but the teacher got around it by teaching them about Berlin in the 60s because of the parallels, but he didn't explicitly tell them, hey, it's the same thing happening. And then apparently the teacher got hauled away by the police anyway, so...
Similar to what happens in this part to Steven and Sarah.
Yeah, makes sense once you realize what's going on.
Yeah. I didn't see this one coming. I saw the first one coming. But
I didn't see this one coming, but as soon as it happened, I was just like, wow.
I was just like, they didn't need to spend an hour in this. They could have spent a little less time in this, but...
I was also kind of bummed because Berlin in the 60s is an interesting location that Doctor Who hasn't explored before or since this story.
Yeah, and they sort of, I guess, in part 3, at least, they just wander around in the streets.
They actually do just wander around the streets because Steven's like, I think we're being watched, and Sarah's like, yeah, we are. And they're like, well, let's try to run away, and then they try to run away, and they get caught, and that's how part 3 ends.
Yeah, I don't know, I just listened to it last night, but I honestly can't remember how they dragged it out for 30 minutes.
I listened to it while I was walking my dog, so I just zoned out at some point. And I was like, ooh, purple trees.
So they get caught, and they get separated.
Yeah.
And they're sort of interrogated and stuff.
And
there's like a mysterious entity here as well.
Yeah.
It's not the time sprite.
I thought it was. I thought it was going to be.
I didn't know.
Also, later I thought it was something else. I'll explain that in a second, but Steven, they put this guy in the cell with Steven, this petty thief named something that I don't remember.
Raquel. I remembered it because it's the Spanish female name, Rachel.
I know someone named Raquel.
Yeah,
it is a...
So I was kind of weirded out by the fact that this guy had that name.
Well, I just, in my head, I was like, oh, it's probably spelled R-A-K-U-L, because that's a vaguely Russian way to spell that, right?
Was this guy the Russian guy? There were more Russians later.
There were more Russians in this German city than there were Germans, to be honest.
Well, I mean...
in this story, anyway.
Well, it's like, that's how they divided it up, right? The Americans were in charge of the west side, and the Russians were in charge of the east.
Which really sucked for Berlin because West Berlin was in the east part of Germany, which was all Russians, so...
Yeah, and I don't know if this was just made up for the story or if this is actually real, but apparently if you're over 60, you're allowed to cross the wall freely.
Yeah, I heard that too, and I was like, I don't know if that's true.
Which, I mean, if it is true, I guess it's like... I don't know why... I can't think of why they would have an age restriction for it.
Let's Google it. Ooh, that's wood. Yeah, so it just says old age pensioners.
Yeah.
Which I guess they made up the number 60 for this story, but...
Yeah,
60 is generally old age.
Yeah. Reminds me kind of that, I don't know if it was a viral video, but I saw this video a couple years ago. I think it was on Facebook, and I didn't watch the entire thing. But it was North and South Koreans meet each other for the first time in, like, however many years, like family members who just got separated after the country separated.
Yeah.
Yeah. Looked kind of touching, but it was one of those Facebook videos that I watched with, like, the sound off and just, like, scrolled past it in, like, 30 seconds, so...
Also, most Facebook videos are, for some reason, square or vertical aspect ratio, which makes them really irritating to watch.
Probably because they were taken with phones, but... Yeah, so that's kind of interesting, I guess.
Yeah, a lot of weird parallels between Berlin and between Germany and North and South Korea, actually. Berlin Wall and all that. Anyway, yeah, so they just they escape with Raquel, and he makes them fight fake papers.
Yeah, he's apparently a spy, not a spy, but he helps people escape.
Yeah, kind of weird that they'd put him in this cell with Steven.
Yeah, pretty convenient there.
They just explain that away later, too. So they escape, they almost make it to the wall, but they get captured again.
Yeah, it was kind of a tense scene where they're walking, and then like this guard shouts like, "Hey, you!" and they're like, "Just keep walking, don't look."
Yeah, because Raquel gets shot in the back.
But yeah, eventually they get captured again.
But this time they're kept together and they're taken. And Steven's like, all right, well, I guess we can, we'll just change history to save ourselves.
Yeah, so they interrogate them again. And they're kept in like a house, I think, or maybe this is a little later, but
they get taken to the house after Steven writes his page of notes.
Oh yeah. They decide to reveal some stuff about stuff that only they could know because they're from the future.
They try to be super vague about it, like using gravity assist to save fuel and Pluto not being a planet.
It's not that vague, actually. But they're taken to this house and they're sort of kept under like house arrest there. And there's this weird creature
chasing them
/ trying to get into the room.
They make a big deal about the fact that the Russians were most interested in the fact that Pluto's not actually a planet.
Yeah, because apparently it was that the Americans discovered Pluto, and the Russians wanted to be like, haha, it's not actually a planet, so it's not actually a big deal.
Yeah, so space was a huge kind of propaganda piece in the 60s. I mean, they say that they're in Berlin in 1966. Also, another suspicious thing that Steven can immediately just place exactly what year they're in Berlin in.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll amount to nothing by the end. It's probably just a really good guess.
Yeah, so, yeah, the Americans would land on the moon in 69, so, yeah, this is right in the middle of the space race. So this monster starts attacking them, and so initially I thought, okay, so, for Doctor Who, I've always had this idea that the universe kind of self-corrects small changes to the timeline, because otherwise it wouldn't really make any sense. But there's a reboot episode where they make this really big change to the timeline, and these monsters show up to try fix the timeline because the change in the timeline was so big it caused paradoxes everywhere that was ripping the universe apart. And I thought, all right, so that's what's happening here. They've changed the timeline so much, even by just telling them such a small piece of information, that the universe is going to rip itself apart. So these monsters are here to try and fix the timeline. But no, it's not that cool.
No, it's just a weasel, as I think, or was it weasel? Gene Marsh calls it in the interviews.
So anyway, they get taken to a house where they're made an offer to tell the Russians everything they know, and they'll be given a house and money.
Yeah, another story where the Russians are the bad guys. What a surprise.
I mean, they're in East Berlin. They've got heavy British accents. It's, it's the Cold War. They're kind of, they're in the wrong place for safety.
Actually, they're in the right place for safety, as we find out soon.
Okay, yes. But anyway, Steven mentions he built a 5D model of Berlin before, and I was like, how do you even do that?
He's from the future.
Yeah, I always forget that Steven was a space pilot from the future.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really play into his character much.
Ever.
I mean, except here where he can write this paper about stuff they have no idea about.
Like Pluto not being a planet. I actually know 2 people who were at the vote to demote Pluto, interestingly enough.
Do you know which side they voted for?
One of them was like one of the proctors, so they weren't allowed to vote, but I've never asked the other person how they voted. Huh. A lot of my friends are curious too, because he's like one of the top professors in the department. We all want to know if he voted yes or no for planet status.
I just started working with this person who apparently also works for NASA. And apparently it's like a big deal that she works for NASA and doesn't want anyone else to know that she works for NASA, but I guess it didn't work because I now know.
You found out?
'Cause I found out. I don't know what she does at NASA, but yeah.
Probably data entry, or maybe she builds spaceships. I don't know. So, yeah, anyway, Steven gets really angry at Sarah, and I'm like, what the heck is going on? And then the doctor wakes him up and is like, good job, Steven. You survived the mental projection. I'm like, God damn it.
Yeah, no, Sarah starts, like, breaking down, and Steven's like, wait a minute. I realized that all of this is just in my mind because Sarah never actually loved me. The real Sarah would never say this. And Sarah's like, no, Steven, I love you. This is all real. I'm a thinking, breathing person. How could I be fake? And Steven's like, nope, it's...
So maybe this is all
fake.
just in Steven's head. Like, all of the Sarah loving Steven things is all just in his head. Like, anytime we see the real Sarah, there's actually almost no indication that she loves him except when Steven's narrating.
But no, it's in her narration too, in part 2.
When
she's like, it's multiple times. Yeah. Go back and listen to it.
I don't remember it at all.
Well, it's in there.
I only remember all the ones that Steven mentioned.
It's in there, like, when Steven is recovering. It's in there multiple times, but this is one of them. Steven's recovering, and Sarah's talking to the doctor, and the doctor, she's like, I want to go be with Steven, but I don't know about my feelings towards him. Like, maybe I just want to be his friend, like, whatever. And the doctor's like, yeah, well, he needs a friend right now, so go be with him. She's like, I'm conflicted, but I'm going to do it anyway.
I don't remember that scene at all.
But, yeah, the all the stuff in part 3 and 4 is just in Steven's head.
I mean, because Steven's also not in Sarah's mental projection at all.
No, he's only in his own. And Sarah's only in her own.
That's also why I was like, well, no, like this Steven as a character even doesn't appear in hers at all.
Oh yeah, she's in like a war zone or something in her own.
No, she's at a party with
really?
With all her family members that she's lost due to the war.
I don't remember that.
And Steven's just not there at all because he mentions that she has this sad smile of understanding when Steven walked in.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. And the doctor has his own projection, but you never find out what it is. So yeah. It's all just in Steven's head.
They ask him what it was, and he brushes it off the way only the first Doctor can, with a laugh and a chuckle about how it's not important. Then they drag the time pilots outside and just leave them there. And then Steven and Sarah are like, this isn't really okay. And the Doctor's like, well, what do you want me to do? First off, the TARDIS isn't precise enough for me to get them back to their own time. Second off, I don't really want to get them to their own time and tell them that time travel worked, because then we'll have a war that'll never end. Yeah.
So you hear their screams as the TARDIS takes off, and the Doctor's like, we'll just turn that off. So they turn the...
Well, they're banging on the door to let him in, and the Doctor speaks back like there's a city just 5 miles away.
Right there, guys.
Just go to the city.
I mean, kind of sucks that they're not going to speak the language of the city. Might not even fit in at all. Don't really know anything about it, but I guess they can figure it out. Not my problem.
But it's better than abandoning them on an unknown, hostile, empty planet.
I mean, it might be worse if they just get immediately captured and tortured.
I mean, okay, I assume the Doctor wouldn't go that far. I assume he looked for a human city at some point to drop him off at.
Yeah, you never know.
I mean, you never know, but I'm going to choose to believe he found a human city to drop them off at. So
maybe it's just a mirage
mental projection. God damn it!
Anyway, yeah, they leave. They go back to go fight the Daleks, but I'm sure they have more adventures between then and there.
Sarah herself has 3 more companion chronicles, plus then they have 2 early adventure stories, including one where the first Doctor meets the Sontarans for the first time with Steven and Sarah.
Sarah's such a not interesting character, to be honest.
Yeah, because I think it's a problem in the fact that she wasn't on the show for all 12 episodes of the Master Plan either. She was only in there for 10, I think,
something
or 11,
like that.
Maybe, and she dies at the end of the story, and in the story itself on TV, because they knew she was going to die, they never really spent any time developing her character because she was supposed to be only a serial one-off character.
Yeah.
So the fact that they're trying to build her a character from less than nothing. Like, Big Finish has built characters from companions before they didn't really have a lot of character, but it's...
Like most of the first Doctor companions.
Yeah, but it's more difficult in this case because they're shoehorning the stories into the middle of another story where it's
I guess
the established character of Sarah...
Well, it's like, go to any random serial and take one of the random, forgettable serial-specific characters and try and write them into the show.
Yeah.
As, like, an interesting person. And that works for some of them. There are a lot of serial-specific...
Like Jago and Lightfoot.
One-off characters, who have their own series. One-off characters that are really interesting, but Sarah just wasn't. She's just a soldier, so...
Yeah, and it's like...
And they talk about it in this, too, how she is, like, shaken up that... her brother died, she killed her own brother, and that Stephen and the Doctor revealed what's actually going on to her.
Mm-hmm.
That's like part of her character in this, I guess, but it was never that interesting.
Yeah, I mean, killing her own brother could have been interesting, but the fact that they never addressed it on the TV show when it happened, and then, the only gap to shoehorn in these stories is a couple episodes after that happened. It's like, at that point, it doesn't make sense for Sarah to suddenly break down grieving. I mean, break down is like not necessarily the right word.
I don't know if it makes sense, but I don't find it that interesting.
Which I guess is a testament to the fact that even the most non-developed companions, looking at you, Mel and Perry, still have some more interesting aspect of character than someone like Sarah did.
Yeah, because they tried to give them those interesting backstories that never had anything to do with anything on the show, at least.
Well, I mean, listening to Flight Through Entirety, they did bring up the good point that the only time I'm pretty sure Mel's backstory being a computer programmer ever actually did anything was that one time in the final part of Trial of a Time Lord, which is like, hey, that's a megabyte modem. But, I mean, a story where the first Doctor meets the Sontaran sounds interesting, but then you're like, oh, it's got Stephen and Sarah? Oh, man, Sarah.
Well, that actually might be kind of cool. The Sontarans are like warlike soldiers, and Sarah...
I guess you could do something.
Maybe she joins the Sontarans. That would be
pulls
cool.
an Adric, who never seems to leave, ever. So... Yeah, I guess you could do something interesting with her. I mean, you'd have to do something related to her background, I guess, is the point that's coming out of this. Like, the background of the fact that she's a soldier for...
Well, maybe you don't have to, but...
But I think that'd be the most interesting way to go about it.
Anyway, there is a preview for another story after this, like there usually is, and it's a second Doctor story, and I wish I chose this story as my pick for the second Doctor, because... I guess it's about a heist at a bank. The Doctor gets a parking ticket for parking the TARDIS in the wrong place. They have to go to a bank to clear something up, and there's a heist. Sounds pretty... and Jamie's in it.
Yeah, Fraser Hines' 2 seconds of second Doctor in that trailer sounded a lot better than his one in...
Yeah, had more practice.
Yeah, exactly. Which is the same point we made last week, that it'll get better with practice, but it sounded really good in that trailer. But yeah, so we're halfway through our 16 weeks of audios.
Yeah, I'm missing the show at this point. I just don't like audios as much.
I enjoy them, but differently from the show. I enjoy the show because it's something I can like just relax and watch, whereas with audios I have to pay some at least mild attention to it because
yeah, that's part of why I don't like it, because anything that makes me think, pay attention, or anything of that kind is automatically worse and garbage. Well, maybe not garbage, but closer to garbage.
Isn't your entire major revolving around thinking about literature?
Yeah, and that's why it's garbage.
Alright, you know what? Fair point. As long as you're consistent, I suppose.
Major actually isn't supposed to be about that. It's just, at my school, it's entirely literature-focused and heavy. And there's like one grammar class, which isn't really right. And that's not how really most programs do it.
Right. Yeah, I'm kind of missing the show too, but at the same time, I'm kind of glad for the break still of not having to watch TV every week for a podcast.
Yeah, instead you have to listen to...
Yeah, but I can listen to it while I walk my dog, which is something I have to do every week anyway.
Well, I can watch shows while I walk my dog, too.
You could.
Yeah.
Don't know how safe it would be.
Probably be pretty safe.
Yeah, maybe in your neighborhood. Over here where there's lots of major streets, probably not.
There's interviews at the end, too, like there usually are. And,
yeah, and the interviews
I didn't listen to the entire thing like I usually don't.
The interviews, to me, reinforce the fact that I don't think Simon Guerrier is a real big Steven Serra fan, because apparently this story wasn't actually the one that was supposed to occupy this slot. David Richardson, the producer, was talking about it, how someone else was going to write a Steven story for this slot in the season, and, you know, as they got into producing the season, when the scripts were supposed to be coming in, he just called them up and said, hey, I don't have the time to write this script right now. I'm just so swamped with other work that I'm not going to get it done. And they called up Simon Guerrier, kind of at the last minute, to write it. And then as he was writing it, he also lost half the story when his hard drive crashed. He said he lost about halfway through part 2 onward. He lost. He had to recreate.
Well, he probably did a pretty
He lost about 7,000 words, he said. So, yeah.
I didn't listen to the entire interview like I normally don't, and or I listened to some of it. And at the beginning, Gene Marsh and Peter Purvis were discussing how multi-layered the story is and how it has. I think Gene Marsh says there are 4 distinct layers to peel back here, with mysteries in the story and reveals and stuff. And I was like, no, there's really only 2. The first one is that it's a projection within the TARDIS, and the second one is that it's a mental projection within Steven's mind.
We didn't explain that it's a mental projection because of the guns that Natalie Lang and the Time Pilots were using or something.
Oh, yeah. Something related to that, but yeah, whatever. So I didn't really get what she was saying there.
Did you get to the part where Peter Purvis was like, yeah, I didn't even get it till we came in to record. Yeah. And then Gene Marsh was like, well, that would explain your acting. I'm like, wow. Oh, wow. Throwing some heavy shade there, Gene. You want to cool it?
She kind of passes it off as a joke after that, but you can kind of tell that it wasn't.
Yeah, honestly, the most interesting part of the interview was the story that was supposed to occupy this slot. No, because David Richardson then mentions that the story that was supposed to occupy this slot that they were still planning on making. But if you look at the stories, and he said it was going to feature Steven and Sarah, and they were going to make it in an upcoming season. But if you look at the seasons of the Companion Chronicles that have been made since this story, there hasn't been another Steven Sarah story.
Sounds like a major conspiracy.
So either it evolved into the Early Adventures range, which is more full cast, and which we'll listen to one for next week, or it just disappeared off the face of the earth.
Yep, could be that.
That is the most intriguing mystery of this entire story, I think. What happened to that story? And was it better? I actually did like this story, though. I mean, not a lot, but I did like it.
I liked parts 1 and 2. Yeah, I'd say it's up there with some of my favorite audios.
Yeah, mine too. Anyway, yeah, so we're halfway through. Email us at thedoctor@decorativevegetable.com. Questions, comments, concerns, angry rants, love letters, your thoughts on the Anachronauts and Time Sprites and Peter Purvis, your favorite pronunciation. You can find us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Google Play, all at Trust Your Doctor. Leave a rating if you like the show.
Us on Facebook, Trust Your Doctor. Like us on Facebook. Let's us on Twitter, TUID Podcast. Follow us on Twitter. And next week, we're listening to Domain of the Voord. Or Voord.
The Voord.
Remember
the Voord from Keys of Marinus?
No, but sure. But until then, the end.